Hello, movie lovers. Today I want to talk about a recent Kino Lorber release, Kino Classics, and this is a 1930 film from Germany called Farewell, Abschied, um, and it is directed by Robert Siodmak, who famous for his film noir, one of the greatest, maybe even the greatest film noir directors in Hollywood in the late 40s. And this is part of what Kino Lorber is putting out. In recent weeks, they put out this Douglas Sirk double feature of Girl from Marshcroft, The Final Chord, and also a Max Ophuls movie, Laughing Heirs. And this is all from the 1930s. These are films that have been restored by the Murnau, F.W. Murnau Foundation, the great German film director from Silent Times. The restorations are a few years old, and they do have blemishes. These aren't perfect restorations. I'm not sure if a perfect restoration of any of these films is even possible, but overall it looked fantastic to me that we can see films like these 90 years later by significant, not only by significant directors, but there's people in here who are very important people, even in Hollywood films. So keep them coming, Kino, because these are very interesting films. And the story is set in a shabby boarding house in Berlin. Now this is 1930, so shabbiness was the rule of the day. As unemployment was over 30%, inflation was gigantic. People's savings were disappearing. And we have a varied group of residents here, businessmen and Russian counts that have escaped the Russian Revolution. We have what appears to be a war or a profiteer who's making deals on the phone all the time. He's the only person in the boarding house that seems to have any money. But the main story is these two lovers on the cover here, and that is Brigitte Horney and Aribert Moog. And Brigitte Horney became a long-time film and television star in Germany. So the girlfriend, played by Brigitte Horney, she is fearful of this new job that her boyfriend is going to take in Dresden. It's a better paying job. She encourages him to go, but what's going to happen to their love? She seems to be genuinely in love with him. He seems to be maybe regarding her more as kind of a toy, but their relationship is infiltrated and in negative ways by the landlady, who tries to appear like she's sincere and giving great advice, but really she is giving each of them false information about the other in order to drive a wedge between them for no other reason than it seems to amuse her. And this is reputed to be the first sound film. If it's not, it's one of the first sound films. So whenever I see a movie, especially from 1930, you wonder how primitive is it going to be, technically speaking. And evidently the German sound system, which was different than the Hollywood sound system, was much more advanced. So this isn't primitive at all. And it uses sound and very well. There's a piano score by Erwin Boots, and he's actually a resident in the boarding house, and he's actually playing himself, and he later becomes a member of a very popular singing group. So his piano score is very naturalistically integrated into the movie and different emotional moments. It's very effective. But all this is 2 years before the rise to Hitler. And you can't watch any of these 1930s German films without wondering what happens to all these people once Hitler comes to power. In 1930, Hitler would have still seen by most Germans as a buffoon and a clown. It's just 2 or 3 years later, he was become the worshipped Führer. And so many of these people are Jewish, so they have to get out. And in the Anthony Slide commentary for Farewell, which is one of his best, I mean, he knows everything about German films of this era and there's a lot of historical context that he provides, and it's really fascinating stuff because it becomes more than just this old movie from 1930. It becomes something a little bit more special when you know about the stories, the backstories of all these people. And of course, Robert Siodmak would be the most famous of them all. And he would get out of Germany. He made a few more films in Germany. He gets out to France, eventually comes to Hollywood. I think he made his first Hollywood film in 1944. And then, you know, he made so many terrific film noirs, and his career is certainly defined by these film noirs. And one of the things he was really good at was the psychological terrors of people in confined spaces, anxieties, and which boarding house. I mean, it's all set in this boarding house. We never go out of the boarding house. And you would think that would be dull, but it's not. I mean, Siodmak is really good at people in these kind of confined spaces, and he uses the spaces, the sets designed for the film, which are really good. I recently did a video on The Spiral Staircase, one of Siodmak's great Hollywood films, mostly set in a kind of gothic, old dark house kind of atmosphere. So you see that side of Siodmak. This is not a film noir, but you do see that side of Siodmak. And of course, when he went to Hollywood, expressionism was very much a part of film noir. This is not an expressionist film. This is much more a naturalistic film. And then I mentioned Brigitte Horney, who was very good and become a big star, and she was also a singing star. She was compared to Marlene Dietrich. She had these great eyes, and all the reviewers were always commenting on how beautiful she was able to use her eyes in her acting. And boy, you really see that in this film. Like I say, she had a long career in Germany. She was not Nazified, but she did appear in a couple sort of propaganda films. However, this man here, Herbert Moog, this was his debut film, as it was for Brigitte Horney, and he was an ardent Nazi, and he was conscripted into the army in 1941, and eventually ended up on the Eastern Front, and was killed. Then we have Vladimir Sokolov, and he plays the Russian Baron, and his name and his face was very familiar to me. As I was watching the film, I said, I know I've seen this guy before. And sure enough, in 1937, he had to make his way, I think, originally to Paris, and then to the U.S. 1937. I think he was in some Hollywood films, but even before he got into films, he was an actor who had studied in Russia under Stanislavski, the method. So when he came to America, Orson Welles knew who he was and cast him in his play about Danton, I think. And of course, he couldn't speak hardly any English there, but Orson Welles was so taken by him that he learned a sort of phonetic way of his performance, and because Welles didn't want to shunt him off into supporting roles, he thought this man who had this great stage reputation, and he taught theater as well, taught acting. He had a long career. I mean, if you grew up in the 50s and 60s, he was in every TV show in the supporting role, but he also was in, what was he in? The Magnificent Seven. He played the old man. It's described as in the Magnificent Seven. He played a lot of different ethnic types. So I don't know, I just love it when you can make these connections from some obscure film from the 1930s all the way up to the Magnificent Seven. And then one of the co-screenwriters was Irma von Cube, and she also made her way to America and Hollywood, and she was nominated for an Academy Award for her contribution to Johnny Belinda, along with the other fellow writers who were credited for that screenplay. She didn't write a lot, but her co-screenwriter was Emmerich Pressburger. And this is, and Pressburger too had to make his exit from Germany, and he went to England, and you know, for those movie buffs out there that know, he was the Archers, he was half of the Archers with Michael Powell, teamed up with him for, I think, over 20 movies. And you really see Pressburger's writing in here, because all the characters are really well drawn. You know, they're sort of types, but they have their little idiosyncrasies that make them really interesting. Then the cinematographer, Eugene Schuften, he also had to emigrate from Germany, and he also ended up in Hollywood and made a number of films and won an Academy Award for The Hustler with Paul Newman. So obviously, there is just an overflow of talent in this little 72-minute movie. And Siodmak and Pressburger and Von Cube, they keep the action moving. This is a really, despite the confined space, this is a really breezy kind of movie. And you also have to wonder what films would have been like had Hitler not come to power, and all these people, all these Jewish people, because UFA, the studio that this was filmed at, was just full of Jewish people from the executives all the way down to the actors and the technicians. All of them had to get out, and pretty quickly, and almost all of them ended up in either the UK or Hollywood making films. What would German films have been like? Now, the previous year, Siodmak made a film called People on Sunday, and that was sort of a collaborative effort by the young Turks of German cinema that included Fred Zinnemann, Billy Wilder, Edgar Ulmer, and Robert Siodmak. I think Robert Siodmak's brother Kurt Siodmak, who was a writer-producer who eventually comes to Hollywood as well. What talent! I mean, it's just amazing. And maybe film noir would have been in Germany instead of Hollywood. At any rate, I really enjoyed Farewell. And there's another, The Devil Strikes at Midnight, I think it's called. Robert Siodmak actually went back to Germany. He was one of the few that came to Hollywood and went back to Europe and made several films in Germany. And that movie, The Devil Strikes at Midnight, which I have, I think it's right somewhere there, right there, which I'll be watching in the next week or so. That was nominated, and did it win? I think it was just nominated for the Best Foreign Film at the Oscars of that year. Okay, thanks for everybody who managed to listen to me this far. I really do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.